Hi, we're back to talk about point of view, specifically head hopping, or that time when we switch from one point of view to another. That is something that we can do. However, there are some right and wrong ways to do that. And today we're going to cover some of those not the best ways, anyway. So, books can be from one point of view, or they can be from multiple point of views. There's no problem with that. And the problem, though, is when we move from one point of view to another within the same scene, within the same paragraph, sometimes even within the same sentences. For instance, when I was in high school, it wasn't unusual to read a book where we head hopped every couple of paragraphs. These were those cheap trade books that one of my friends smuggled to me every day at school. Yes, I'm talking about those Harlequin romances. Shh. Anyway, over the years, most genres, including romance, have moved to a cleaner, more streamlined way of dealing with point of view. You can still change perspectives, but you need a scene break or a chapter break before you do it. In general, this helps the reader stay grounded in that moment in the story. So every once in a while, I stumble upon a book that still moves from one point of view to another multiple times within the same scene. And, this is disconcerting for me as a reader. I don't know who to focus on. I don't know who to care about the most in that moment of the story. Perhaps the most important, it reminds me that I'm reading something instead of just immersing myself in the story and getting lost in it. And a lot of times it means I'm thinking about the author instead of the story. I'm wondering, why did the author choose to do it this way? And that's not why I'm reading. I want to escape. So recently, an example of that is I found this fantasy book that moved around to multiple characters within the scene. Like, we hit everybody, and there were 4 or 5 of them. And my guess is the author thought they were doing third person omniscient, and we'll talk about that in the next lesson. But the overall effect was I never fully connected with any of those characters. And that was sad because the story itself wasn't that bad. It was a pretty good story. I just never felt fully, like I said, connected. I never experienced it because I was getting bits and pieces from here and there, looking at the same thing, and it felt distant. And that's one of the weaknesses of third person omniscient to begin with. So maybe that was the main problem. But a lot of times I had to backtrack and try to figure out whose head am I in right here, who's thinking this, what's going on. And that's not what you want to do as a reader. So when you start a scene, no matter if you're in first or third person, limited or omniscient, choose one character and stay in their point of view until you switch scenes or chapters. So think of it this way. That character is your vehicle for showing the reader what you want them to experience. Climb inside that character's head, look out through their eyes, hear with their ears, smell with their nose, and feel their emotions with their body. So the deeper you dive into that character, the more you use them as your lens, the richer the story will become, and the more your reader will connect in some way with your characters and story. So as we end, I wanted to share with you 3 examples. This is actually from a blog post I wrote way back in 2011 when I was trying to figure this stuff out for myself. And sometimes point of view is obvious, but sometimes it can be very subtle, and it's something you really have to think about and try to figure out, did I just switch character points of view? So I want to give you 3 examples and see if you can pick up on it. So one way that we can switch is a character knows something that they have no way of knowing, okay? So here's an example from my very first novel. Talon listened intently while studying the map of the tram rail line. He turned now to Ruin and played the part he was expected to play. I understand perfectly. What will be the reward for my sacrifice? Ruin smiled again, this time with a little more respect for the daredevil in front of him. Okay, did you catch it? How can Talon know that Ruin is showing him more respect, that he feels more respect? So maybe there were some physical clues that make him think that, but that's not what I wrote. I wrote that Ruin had more respect. And there's no way that my other character whose point of view I'm in can know that. And this kind of slip can be hard to catch because it's not obvious that you head hopped. But it is easy to fix when you do catch it. So I changed it and said, Ruin paused, and Talon felt a wave of approval roll over him. And this works because Talon is actually an empath. He can feel other people's emotions. He can actually get inside their head and control their mind and their memories. So that is a little bit better. Okay, so another way that it can happen is if you move from one perspective to another in the middle of a scene, and sometimes it might just be within one paragraph. And like I said, it's not always obvious. So here's another example. There is Selvin blinked and Talon cursed himself. The spell dissolved and he was too exhausted to reestablish the connection. A groan escaped as he called on the demon for strength, but it laughed at him as it retreated to the back of his mind. His only option was to release Selvin and return to his seat. I'm sorry, what were we talking about? Selvin tried to hide the confusion that clouded his mind. The Saren Bridge, Master. Ah, yes. Okay, that was a little bit longer segment. Did you catch it? So once again, I moved from Talon's point of view to Selvin's, and I think some of these characters might have had name changes by the time it was published. But although Talon knows that Selvin is going to be confused as he comes out of this mind control spell, this was a head hop because I said Selvin tried to hide the confusion that clouded his mind. So we went from Talon's mind into Selvin's of why he was saying what he was saying. Once again, it was an easy fix, and I chose to show the confusion instead of stating it. Selvin's brows drew together, and he shook his head for a moment before frowning at Talon. I'm sorry, what were we talking about? So see, I gave physical clues as to what he might be feeling that Talon could actually see. And so that way I stayed in Talon's head, was looking with his eyes, and we kind of take the context clues that, oh, he's a little bit confused. Okay, so this next one, the last example, is when your character says or thinks something that slips into a different point of view. And this one, to me, well, let me just read you the example. This is not for one of my books, but it's a little bit harder to explain. Okay, so let's say you've been writing from one character's perspective for several scenes, and this person always refers to his mom as Mom. And then you write something like, I watched Deborah pull the spilled noodles into the... Okay, sorry, let me start over. I watched Deborah push the spilled noodles into the trash can, her long hair covering her pretty face as she bent over. Okay, so two main things here. One, he's been calling her Mom the whole time. Would he call her, by her name in his head? No, he'd still think Mom, just like he always does. And then, I don't actually know the age of this character, but do kids notice details about their mothers? Maybe, but this one reads really creepy to me. And creepy doesn't always mean a point of view change, but I've seen this in several short stories, and it pulls me out and makes me say, wow, that was really creepy. Okay, so don't do it. If your main character is a child or someone younger, don't use their eyes to tell me that his mom is attractive, okay? Find a different point of view character to get that information in. Okay, so those are three very, I guess, easy when it's pointed out, but when you're going through your manuscript, it isn't always easy to catch those things. So with a little bit more attention to what we're doing, we can catch them in our revisions, and if we are conscious of it as we're writing, hopefully not too many of them will slip in. Okay, in the next video, we will talk about first and third, limited and omniscient. We'll touch on second point of view, and we'll talk about some of their strengths and their weaknesses. And I'll give you a few tips to know which one might fit your genre the best.